Hello everyone, today's episode we're going to talk about how to forge success from nowhere. I'm going to give you a clear psychological method. In fact, I would call it the psychological method that you need to forge success from nowhere in any pursuit. And this is something that I see most people fail to do. They fundamentally fail in one of these steps and they do it over and over again, and that's ultimately the reason why they fail to have success in the pursuits they're undertaking. So if you want to learn this powerful psychological method for having success in any pursuit that you undertake, then stick around. This is a Deep Psychology podcast. I'm your host, Ross Edwards, writer, meditation teacher, founder of deep-psychology.com, and avid lover of all things psychological. In listening to this podcast, you're part of the worldwide deep psychology community of tens of thousands of people undertaking profound personal transformation. You can join us on any of the major podcasting platforms, and make sure to visit the site deep-psychology.com for lots of high quality resources. Let's get started. So, how to forge success in any of your pursuits. Now, I had a bit of I had a moment of doubt before I decided to shoot this episode, because it might sound kind of like a gimmick, or it might sound like some sort of flimsy method that I'm talking about here. And then I sort of thought about it a bit more, and I thought, is this just like the methods that you get in these self-help books that don't really help you very much? They're too general, they're too sort of disconnected from real life, and they're not practical enough, and they're not really grounded in any real experience. You kind of get the sense that the author hasn't actually used their own method. Otherwise, you might ask, well, if they're telling me how to be successful, why don't they just use their own method to have success? So I had that doubt. I was like, is this just another one of those methods, so-called methods or strategies or secret techniques? And I actually don't think it is. Now listen, you're going to have to make up your own mind. You're going to have to listen to this episode and apply these principles in your own life and to your pursuits, and see, does it really work? However, what I'd say is that this isn't, I'm teaching you a very broad technique, a very fundamental technique, very fundamental principles that apply to any pursuit. And they apply because they are so fundamental to the process of skill building and of building momentum in any pursuit, that if you fail at one of these steps, then you're going to be struggling big time. And as I said in the introduction, what I see is that most people that I look around, I look around at family and friends and people that I teach, and I look and ask, what is it about this person's psychology that is causing the lack of success in this pursuit? And usually I realize it's because one of these steps is missing. So this isn't like a sort of flimsy technique or sort of like a pyramid scheme. There's like the fundamental psychological principles that you need to be successful. And where did I get this from? I think that's really important, so that you understand that I've actually used this in my own life. And actually, I've been using it for many years. I've maybe not always known that I have, and I've maybe not been able to articulate it, and I've maybe not defined specific steps involved, and I've maybe not, realized what was happening at any time, because I hadn't read books and I hadn't really studied this stuff or thought about it in any detail. But I've been using this for a very long time in my pursuits. Um, and I find that it's when I sort of analyze, the languages I've learned, the the skills I've learned, like writing or like how to run a business or even things like running, even things like exercise. Any pursuit that I've done, when I really think about what are the commonalities here, like it can't just be a mistake that I have success in different areas of my life. It can't just be a mistake. I've observed that I have success in different areas of life and I can reliably reproduce it. I've done it over and over again in different areas of life, not just in terms of like business, but in terms of hobbies, in terms of exercise, and in terms of just my interests in life. What are the commonalities? And so that's where this technique comes from. It's from me sitting down and analysing my own successes and looking at what are the fundamental steps. Obviously, if you learn Mandarin, which I've done to a pretty decent level, if you learn Mandarin or if you learn how to become a better runner, obviously the actual the skill building process is very different because they're two different, completely different things. But under the surface, what I've found is that in my psychology, there is always a certain outlook and there's always a certain amount, there's always a certain key things that I always do when I'm working or I'm sort of generating a new goal for my pursuit, or I'm working towards my goals in my pursuits. There's always key things that are happening there. And this is, as I said, I've been using this for probably about 15 years without knowing it. I'm being deadly serious. I know it might sound like a bit of an exaggeration, like, oh, this is some like self-help guru exaggerating to sound cool and to go viral. I'm being very serious here. I have been using this for a very long time. As I said, not always consciously, but when I look back, I realise, okay, those are the common threads. Those are the psychological principles I've been working on. And I've also backed this up through studying success, reading a lot of the well-known authors on the subject, and just sort of cross-referencing and just sort of fleshing out a little bit my own conclusions and my own ideas as to what are these common threads. And I think I've found a process that it's reliable and repeatable, and it's also quite simple, but it's also deceptively deep, deceptively profound, and very fundamental, like so fundamental. This isn't a pyramid scheme. I'm teaching you psychological principles. I'm teaching you how it is that we go from basically feeling inferior and feeling, when you want to learn an instrument, for example, you look at people who can play the instrument and you think, how on earth could I ever get to that level? I'm not a musician. I'm not good at music. I don't have a musical ear. These people were born that way, and you look at them and you just think that they do it so effortlessly, and it doesn't compute. How could I possibly get to that level? These principles help you get from there to a position of like true competency, to the level of the people that you admire. And it takes you through the process of actually creating goals and then how to make those goals an actual reality, not in some, not by praying and wishing for it to happen, but actually how do you do that? How do you bring it forward in your life? So I think we're now ready to actually cover the technique. I just want to say before we do this, there's 5 steps involved. I just want to say a few things before it, that, as I've said, it might sound sort of overly simplistic. It might just sound like I'm like making this up, or I'm sort of simplifying things to become popular or whatever it is, or to make a nice sounding video. If you get that impression, I encourage you to do two things. I encourage you just to be open minded and to think more deeply about this problem of how do we actually forge success from nowhere. I want you to think more deeply about it. And you might realize that your assumptions on the matter, you have many assumptions on the matter for one thing, and you might realize that those assumptions aren't actually very accurate. Assess your own assumptions and realize that they might be deceiving you. You might be oversimplifying or overcomplicating something here. And also ask you to look at your own pursuits. Look at what you've tried to get good at in your life. Look at what you're trying to currently get good at in your life. And look at, where am I failing to live up to these steps? Where am I going wrong? Is there any of these steps that I'm not fully completing? And when you think about, if you identify a step like that and you think and you realize that you've not been completing that step, or you've not been doing it, or you've just sort of overlooked it completely, you have to ask, well, what are the knock-on effects of that? And you might be you might be underestimating, the effects of overlooking that step. Because even the first step, if you don't take the first step, all the remaining steps are not going to happen. And so you might be wondering, I tried my best to get good at this language, but what you're telling me here, it doesn't sound that different. Well, right, but if you're missing the first step, for example, the other steps are not going to happen to the extent that they need to happen. So that's what I'd say. If you're not sure about this, obviously I'm not asking you to believe me, right? You have to do it yourself and see that it works, right? But for now, to entertain it as an idea at least, and to start taking it on, and to start, right, okay, I can see the importance of this. Just realize you might be underestimating the power of this method, and you might be underestimating the importance of all the steps involved. And also to look at your own pursuits and to realize where you may have gone wrong in those pursuits and how it maps up to what I'm telling you here. Alright, so now let's go into the 5 steps, and then we're going to talk about in depth the importance of each one and what each one really means. So the 5 steps, and this is a good way to remember it, is it's a nice sort of catchy one word abbreviation for each one. So it's choose, imagine, plan, refine, persevere. Step 1, choose. Step 2, imagine. Step 3, plan. Step 4, refine. Step 5, persevere. Now, let's go into each one and discuss why it's important, and what you might be missing if you're not having success in your pursuits, and how to have success in each of these areas. And I just want to say before we do that this method, this lasts for years, okay? So the early ones might just be at the very start, or you might keep doing them over and over again just to sort of refine and to get your goals clearer. And then, but the later stages, these take years. The whole process to get successful at something might take 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. It might even take longer than that. It depends on how ambitious you are, how ambitious your goals are. But step 1 in any case is choose. Choose. So here you basically choose your pursuit. What do you want to be successful at? Where do you want to have success in? It could be a business, it could be a new job, it could be a career, it could be your current job or career. It could be a hobby, it could be a new skill that you're trying to learn, anything. That might seem trivial, we need to choose a field, right, or an area. It seems quite trivial. But actually, this is one of the main problems that I find with people, is that they're not clear. They really are not clear at all Like, and I've seen this in my own life. When I'm not clear about what I want and why I want it, I can choose something, but I don't even choose it properly because I'm not really fully invested in it emotionally. And therefore, the remaining steps, as I said in the introduction, the remaining steps are not going to happen to the level they need to happen because I'm not invested in it emotionally. I'm not actually clear about what I really want. And so, what you need to have here is you need to have some sort of emotional attachment to this goal. If you don't, you might still get results. You may be able to forge success in areas that you're not passionate about, but it's going to be much more difficult because you're going to need to like give yourself some sort of an extrinsic motivation for that to happen. You're not going to want it for its own sake. And when things aren't going your way, you're much more likely to give up. If you don't really want it that much, you're going to give up because you're going to get tested. We're going to talk about this later on. You're going to get tested a lot as you're trying to forge success in any pursuit. What I find with people is that they choose something, but it's sort of like a half-hearted decision. It's like they're not really that invested in it. You know, they choose it like, oh, I want to learn this language, but the desire, there's no burning desire there. Like you just sort of, you can tell it's just sort of a half-hearted thing that they've not really thought about, and that it's something that doesn't really come from within. You know, it might just be like a goal that they've picked up from someone else or from somewhere else, and it's like you can feel that they're not going to stick with it. Like you just get that sense. I don't know about you, I can get that sense from people quite quickly. And lo and behold, I look a few months down the line and they've given up or they've not really made any progress. And to me, that is a lot of the time, it's just a step one problem. It's just the problem that they've not really chose something that they're that bothered about, they're that invested in. And so, of course, they're not going to stick with it. Of course, they're not going to do the rest of the steps to the level that they need to because there's no burning passion there. Whereas with me, this is something I've always been pretty good at. I've always had a good idea of what I wanted to do, what I wanted to achieve. And I don't mean that necessarily in a career sense. I mean, if I want to learn an instrument, I really want it. Like, it's not just a temporary desire. Like, I've learned the guitar to quite a decent level. I've not played for a while, for one reason or another. But in my peak years, I got to a pretty good level. And over the years, I've had other desires to learn other instruments. But I've realised that my desire to learn those instruments wasn't that strong. And so I've just not done it. With the guitar, my desire was very strong. And I knew, when I chose to learn the guitar, I really chose to do it. And there was no questioning involved. There was no half-hearted effort. There was no sort of doubt that this is what I wanted to learn. This is what I wanted to get good at. This is what I would dedicate a lot of time to. What I find with people, as I've said, is just their choice is just very. They don't really mean it. You know, there's no force or power behind their choice. You have to make sure that you love it and you really, really want it. If you don't, you're better not to start. Seriously, you're better not to start because you're going to get frustrated and you're going to know the whole time that you're not really that invested in it. If you're lacking in desire, you need to fuel it. You know, you need to fuel your inspiration and your passion for this thing before you seriously plan to get successful in it. Because, as I've said, to have sort of rocket fuel or the energy required to keep going with this for months and years, you need to be really passionate about it. Otherwise, you're simply not going to make it. So that's step one. Step two is imagine. Imagine. If only it was that easy, right? But it's not just about imagining, you know, Think and Grow Rich. You know, obviously, I know that Napoleon Hill's message was not that we can just imagine money in our lives and we're going to get it. But don't make that mistake. It's not just about imagining, but imagining is a really strong part of this. What do I mean by the step imagine? To me, you have to. This imagine part is about thinking about what you really want from the pursuit. Who could you become? What could you achieve? Like, what's the greatest fruition of this pursuit for you? What's the highest possible achievement you could make? Um, and again, most people fail on this part so bad. Like, it's it's shocking, um, and they miss out a key point, which is a crucial part of the imagination step. But it's just a crucial part of becoming good at something, and it's that you must imagine yourself reaching a level that you cannot possibly foresee yourself reaching at the moment. It needs to feel impossible. It needs to feel like it's far beyond you. It needs to feel like it's like a real jump is required, like a real change in you is required to reach this. It should feel kind of intimidating. It should give you, it should make you feel scared. It should make you wonder, how on earth am I ever going to get that good? This is necessary. And it's necessary for a few reasons, right? First of all, having an inspiring vision, one that seems almost like even idealistic, or it might just seem impossible, or it might seem sort of overwhelming. This kind of ambition, this kind of goal, that's what gives you the rocket fuel required, because you realize I'm not good enough to reach this right now, otherwise I would have it already. Um, and it gives you the rocket fuel required to keep going for months and years. If you just have a piddly goal, and this is what I notice in most people, that I notice they're not having the success that they want. If you have a piddly goal, you get piddly desire. You get a piddly inner flame. You don't get an inner flame, you get like a little kindling flame. It doesn't inspire you, and it doesn't sort of show you a new vision for who you could be. It doesn't ask you to expand or grow, and there's something about having a very powerful vision that seems impossible that is deeply inspiring, and it awakens something deeper within you. It awakens like a new part of you that is stronger and bigger, and then you ask that to come through and to work its magic. When you have a really small piddly goal, none of that happens. You're just stuck in who you've always been. If you can imagine yourself reaching a goal and it doesn't seem very difficult, it's basically because that goal it's too close to you, it's too within your reach, it's too close to your current identity, your current self. And so you're just, as I've said, what I've said, you're not going to have enough desire, you're not going to have the drive, the persistence, you're not going to feel the same inspiration, you're not going to feel that same like sort of inner growth that you can feel. And ultimately, you're just not going to take enough action because it feels too close. It feels too close to you. And you think, well, it's so close, I'm not going to work for it then. And then you're going to probably underestimate how much work it takes, even if it feels close. And you're just not going to put the work in required. And ultimately, you're not going to be successful, because to be successful, you need to reach an extraordinary level in things, a level that most people aren't going to reach. That is what being successful means. It means doing something outstanding. If you're just in your ordinary desires and your ordinary goals that seem very close to you and very achievable, you're not going to achieve anything outstanding. An example, let's say you want to learn a language, but you say, I just want to learn a few basic phrases. Right, well that doesn't inspire you, does it? It doesn't ask you to grow, really. It asks you to learn a few phrases, that's about it. If you come to me and you say, I imagine myself being totally fluent, like totally operational in this language, I can use it for anything, I can read, I can write, I can listen effortlessly in this language, that might feel scary to you, but that's going to mobilize you so much more than just being able to say a few phrases right. It might feel scary, it might feel like alien to you, it might feel like I don't speak that language well. I can't speak that language well. If you get that feeling, that's when you're starting to create goals that are actually the right goals, the goals that you need to create. This is a very counterintuitive point right here. And I think it's the reason most people don't do it. For some reason, I've always known this, or maybe I sort of stumbled my way into it. Maybe I stumbled my way into knowing it by, trying to get successful in different areas of my life. But for a long time now, at least, I've known that I need to set very challenging goals for myself. And this is the only way to achieve success. I do not achieve success by setting goals that I feel comfortable with. I need to feel uncomfortable. I've actually written an entire article about this. It's called something called How to Set Ambitious Goals. If you search for ambitious goals on my website, you'll find it. Do not underestimate this step. Like, if you're thinking about getting good at anything, honest to God, you need to set goals that scare you, that seem beyond you, that seem impossible, that seem like a fantasy. You need to. That is what will get you to your success. Or it's not the only thing, of course, there's 5 steps, but it's a crucial step in the process. If you don't do this, and I've seen it over and over again with many people, you're totally like hamstringing this process right here. And on that point, while I'm talking about this being like a daunting step, you're having to think beyond what you're currently capable of and sort of seriously entertain that as a possibility. This is a very beautiful step. It's actually one of the most inspiring parts of the journey, is thinking up what do you want to achieve, what do you want to bring forth in your life. This is where you're sort of like the artist, imagining what are you going to paint. It's not the same as doing the painting, obviously, and it's not the same as the final result. But this is where you actually get to think about what do you want and what level do you want to achieve in it. And what I'm asking you to do here is not to limit yourself and not to base your goals on your current identity, your current strengths, your current possibilities, your current limitations, not to really think about those too much. You need to think forward. You need to think about what is possible and what you could create, and without letting your limiting beliefs get in the way, without your current sense of who you are getting in the way. I'm encouraging you to be very ambitious here, because I can guarantee you that whatever you can imagine right now, you will achieve that, and you'll achieve more than that. Whether it's in languages, instrument, starting a business, whatever you can imagine right now, it's very likely that eventually you will achieve that and you'll actually go way beyond it. But if you don't allow yourself to imagine that in the first place, you're hamstringing this entire process, because you're not ever going to seriously entertain it as a possibility, and therefore you're never going to take the action that is required to reach a very high level in anything. So now, step 3 is to plan. So this step is about planning out your strategy. How are you actually going to get from A to Z? How are you going to get from your current level to the level that you want to achieve in whatever pursuit you've chosen in step 1, and whatever pursuit you've imagined your grand, inspiring, fear-inducing goals for in step 2? How are you going to get there? I want you to come up with a plan for it. This is also a big trap though. We need to plan. We need to think about, we might need to do a bit of investigation, and we might need to look around for resources or opportunities or courses or whatever. How are we going to get there? You need to have an idea of that. You at least need to get the ball rolling. In fact, you should focus on getting the ball rolling. What can I do now? What can I do within the next month or 2 months or 6 months to get the ball rolling here? To give me some momentum, to get me start to gain some skills here. Just get the ball rolling. And in fact, that is the most important part, because this is how you start, right? You start when you realize this is what I need to start doing to get successful. However, as I said, it's also a trap, because if you try and plan out every step, A to Z, all 26 steps from A to Z, for example, there's a big problem there. And the problem is that you actually don't know what the steps will be. As I said, this process can take months and years. The more ambitious your goals are, the longer they'll likely take. And so if you try to plan everything out now, you're also jeopardizing this process, because you actually don't know what the steps are. And by trying to force yourself to know now, you're not remaining open, right? You're not remaining open to what the knowledge you will gain as you walk the path towards this goal that you have. You have to plan to a certain point, and you also have to just leave it. You have to kind of have faith, and you have to just say, right, eventually I'll figure out, in 6 months' time I'll know what to do. 6 months after that I'll know what to do. And then by the time I've been doing it for months and years, I'll have a much bigger idea of how long it actually takes to see progress here. And I have a much better idea of the methods that I need to use, the methods that work for me and the methods that are out there, what works for me and what will actually take me to where I want to get to, right? So you can definitely hamstring yourself with planning too much, but you can also hamstring yourself by not planning enough, and by sort of overthinking it. What I find with people is often they're looking for some fancy method, right? They're looking for the perfect language learning method that will all of a sudden it will take them to fluency or whatever. Or they're looking for the perfect way to lose weight, or they're looking for the perfect way to start a business. And what happens is they spend too much time thinking about the best way to do it rather than just getting their hands dirty. And actually, the getting the hands dirty is the action that you need, because that's how you actually discover what the best methods are. Now, if you have a way of knowing in advance, great, that's great. Often you won't really know in advance, so you have to just get your hands dirty in any pursuit and start taking action as soon as you possibly can. Don't let this planning thing hamstring you. And also try not to fall into ineffective methods either. There's certainly many ineffective methods out there that they might be popular, for example, but they're not popular enough, or they're not powerful enough, I should say, to actually have an effect. And in that sense, not planning enough means not doing enough research and not looking into it enough and not thinking carefully enough about, is this method actually going to get me to where I want to get to? So you have to reach a nice balance. I say you want to have a nice solid plan for the first few months. And then over time, you might discover that you can plan further than that. Another key step involved is step 4, which is very closely related to step 3. It's closely related to planning. It's called refine. Step 4 is to refine. So basically, what refine means is, as the weeks and months and years go by, you're going to notice some things that work, some things that used to work and no longer work, new things that appear on the horizon, new possibilities that appear on the horizon. Maybe in that field something comes up, like a new technique, a new knowledge comes up, whatever, new things that you need to learn, things that you didn't realize you need to learn, and so on. It's going to change, right? You're not just going to come upon a strategy when you're a beginner and then that'll be the strategy you use for the next 5-10 years. It's not going to work like that. But you have to be open enough to refine the strategy. It's a critical point. And it's one that I see so many people failing at. It's like they think they have a strategy, but the strategy hasn't produced any results for them at all. And they're just stuck in the same place, and they don't change because they just have it in their mind that is the right strategy, but it's not actually doing anything for them. Be open to refining all elements of your strategy. Be open to trial and error. Don't be afraid to chop and change, and don't think that you're failing if you're chopping and changing. You're getting better as you do that, because you're realizing what isn't working, what is inefficient, and then you're saying, right, this is what's actually going to take me forward. refine. You have to refine your strategy constantly, especially something like starting a business. You know, if you're learning a language, you might just choose one method, and it might have like a beginner, intermediate, advanced level uh, content, and you can just follow that. And it might actually take you all the way from beginner to advanced, in which case you don't really need to refine your strategy. You still need to track your results and make sure that it's actually effective, but you might not refine it. However, something like starting a business, wow, the amount of refining that goes on, the amount of chopping and changing that goes on is happening on a daily basis. It happens on a daily basis for me. If I just if I get rigid and I say no, this has to work, this has to be the solution, I wouldn't be where I am now with this website, with my podcast, with everything else I do. It wouldn't have happened. I've, with something like starting a business, if it's something that you're doing and you're sort of discovering it as you go along, you're sort of improvising as you go along, you're going to have to refine so much. And it's such a critical part. Like, you can do 1, 2, and 3 okay. Like, especially something like starting a business, you could do 1, 2, and 3 okay. You know, you choose, you want to start a business, you know exactly what it is you want to do. You imagine like the ultimate fruition of this business for yourself, for your life, for other people, for the people you're serving, for the field that you're working in. You can plan out your path for the next 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. You can take lots of action, and then you can 6 months down the line you plan again. But if you're not willing to refine and you're not willing to get rid of strategies that do not work, you're going to sink. You know, it'd be like carrying all this excess luggage on a ship. Eventually you're going to sink, you know, if you carry too much. You've got to be willing to throw things overboard and to keep, so that you can keep moving. And this isn't just true in business, it's really true in anything, especially if you are making the decisions over, say, how you're learning it, how you're acquiring the skills, how you are actually going about trying to achieve success. Alright, so we've done steps 1 to 4. So you might be wondering, well, what's left, Ross? You know, we've chosen it, we've imagined our goals, our ultimate desires. We've planned out our path, at least for the short term, and we've remembered to refine our strategy over and over again. Step 5 is just as important as the other ones, and it's not so much a step as in a point or a key pillar of the entire process, and it's to persevere. Choose, imagine, plan, refine, and finally persevere. Wow, there is so much to say about perseverance, and I've made episodes about perseverance before, and I've written several articles about it, covering it from different angles. What I found in my pursuits is the reason I am successful, ultimately, is not because I'm talented, as people like to think I am, not because I have a gift for things, which I don't believe that I do at all. Even in the areas that people think I have a gift in, I was really not gifted to begin with at all. I can promise you that. And yes, I've had luck, and yes, I may have stumbled upon a good method somehow. And yes, all the other steps are absolutely critical. But you can do all of that. But if you don't persevere, you're not going to get anywhere. And if I hadn't persevered for many months, many years, many dark nights in my pursuits, I can tell you right now, I would not be anywhere in them. Really nowhere at all. If you're struggling with success in any pursuit, I can almost guarantee that perseverance is a problem for you. I can almost guarantee it, because it's such a crucial aspect of being successful in anything. And the thing about perseverance is it might sound like a cliche. You know, everyone talks about perseverance, you must persevere. Or it might sound like a nice idea. You know, it might sound, be perseverant and you'll achieve whatever you want. Or it might just sound like lip service. It might sound I'm saying this because it seems like a good idea to me. If you've achieved anything in your life, it's largely because of perseverance. I want you to think back to your past pursuits, whatever it is you've been successful in, and realize that you persevered a lot to get there. Because you cannot be successful without perseverance. What's going to happen as you're trying to achieve success in your pursuits is that you're going to come up against obstacles. You're going to come up against obstacles daily, weekly, monthly. They're going to vary in size. Some of them are going to be quite small obstacles that you can work around or bash through quite easily. And other ones are going to be so persistent that you'll wonder, how on earth do you ever overcome them? And what perseverance does is it basically decides, are your obstacles going to win, or are you going to win? Do your obstacles defeat you, or do you defeat your obstacles? That is perseverance. Because perseverance is what keeps you on the path. It's what keeps you in this process. All these 4 steps that you've already done is what keeps you in that process and keeping working towards your goals. By definition, if you're not perseverant enough, you give up at some point. That's a necessary conclusion that we must draw. If you're not perseverant enough, by definition, you give up. And by definition, you will stop making progress. And by definition, you will not reach the goal that you imagined it for yourself in step 2. However, by definition, if you persevere, you're going to remain on the path for as long as necessary. And as I've said, I've made several articles on this, several episodes on this as well. It's really tough to describe the importance of perseverance. If you've persevered a lot in your life, you'll know exactly why it's important. Perseverance is like it's like the force that overcomes all of your obstacles and all of the things that seem to be in your way, all of the reasons you give yourself or that life gives you for not being able to achieve something. Really, perseverance is at the heart of overcoming it. It's not really anything else. It's perseverance fundamentally. If you're not persevering in your goals, I can guarantee you're not getting anywhere. And this is what I see in people so often. They're actually, they've actually chosen something. They've imagined their ideal scenario. They've even planned out their path a little bit. They're refining their strategy over time. But they just reach a point where they stop. It might be after a year, it might be after 2 years, it might be after 3 years, it might be after longer than that. But they stop before they really see the true results. They stop in the beginner's hump. They sort of stop in the dry spell at the beginning. There's always a dry spell when you start out, and that's where people tend to quit. That's what I found. That's where I find that I'm most tempted to quit. It's during that period where things don't seem to be going my way, and I'm not really making any progress. I'm not gaining traction. I'm not really going beyond the initial stages. That's where people tend to quit. And by definition, if you quit during that phase, you're not going to be successful. And this phase you don't experience that phase because you are a certain way, because you're inherently incapable, because you don't have the talent, because you weren't born to do this, or whatever it is. You're incapable during this phase, or you feel deficient during this phase, simply because the phase, this beginner's hump, and I've written an entire article about the beginner's hump, is a fundamental part of getting good at anything. It's a fundamental part of the growth journey in any area in life. There's the beginner's hump. There's a dry spell at the beginning. There's a period where you feel lost and you just cannot seem to make any progress, really. you have to persevere at least until that's over. And the sweet thing is, once that part is over, things get much more enjoyable, and you can actually see your progress, and you can feel your competence. You can actually feel it, and you can see it, and you know you are competent. And then if you persevere from that point on, and you reimagine new goals for yourself that are beyond your current capabilities at that point, and then you plan, refine, and then you persevere, you're going to reach some wonderful places. So as I said, it's very difficult for me to concisely and very convincingly describe why perseverance is so important, but here's a way that I'm going to try. Without perseverance, you're simply not going to be successful in anything, and I can almost guarantee if you're not being successful in something that you lack perseverance. So I think I've said enough about this topic. If you want to read more, learn more, see some very clear examples from my own life and examples just in general that can help you understand this process better, search How to Forge Success from Nowhere on deep-psychology.com and have a read of that article. There I go into a lot of detail and I very carefully explain all of this, and it's a good reference for you to accompany this episode right here. So choose, imagine, plan, refine, persevere. That's the 5 steps. Do not underestimate this. I'm serious. This is a process that I use all the time, knowingly or unknowingly, to be successful in different areas of life. And it might seem simple, and it is simple, but it's deceptively powerful and deceptively sort of complex in a way. Because when people talk about their failures or their successes, they talk about it in all sorts of different language, but they don't generalize it. And they don't realize that actually at some point this process is involved. You know, everything you do to have success, is it somehow related to this process? So it might seem abstract, it might seem also simplistic, but I just ask you to do it first of all, and to look at where you've not been having success and ask yourself, are any of these steps missing? Like, honest to God, ask yourself. And if they are, well, you're setting yourself up for failure, I'm afraid. And that explains why you're not having success, because one of these steps are missing fundamentally. All right. Thanks a lot for joining me for today. I really love talking about the topic of success, particularly the topic of perseverance, because perseverance is just so powerful that, and most people totally misunderstand the power and don't understand that this is really behind a lot of success. Brilliant. All I want to say before I go is please support me on Patreon. That would be much appreciated, so that I can keep this podcast free and I can keep producing it. Costs time and money, and so if you're able to contribute a small amount every month, that would really help. And of course, remember to check out the accompanying article. Search How to Forge Success from Nowhere at deep-psychology.com. All right, thanks for joining me. I'm going to leave you. Cheers, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please leave a review. And if you'd like to get in touch, you can email me at ross@deep-psychology.com. If you'd like to go deeper, head to deep-psychology.com for articles, courses, ebooks, and one-to-one coaching. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.